Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look at installing the Roadmaster 12 volt outlet kit on a 2025 Buick Encore GX. And this is going to be a great addition and maybe even a required addition if you're using a portable braking system. Today we're putting the Blue Ox Patriot braking system on our Encore, which is a great braking system, but in order to power it, you want 12 volt power that's constant and getting 12 volt power the entire time. While this vehicle does require a battery disconnect in order to flat tow it, the 12 volt outlet kit is run directly to the battery, so there's constant 12 volt power, and it's essentially just a cigarette style lighter outlet. And it's going to be a remote spot to where you mount it wherever you want, and you'll always have the power to be able to plug in that braking system. That way it's going to have power the entire time while you're flat towing your vehicle. Pretty easy installation. The hardest part is passing the wires through the grommet into the firewall and into the engine bay to tap into that 12 volt power. There's going to be 5 main components that are going to be required at minimum to flat tow any vehicle, and the Buick's not going to be any different, except you are going to need a battery disconnect, or you're going to have to manually pull the battery cable off each time you flat tow. And we installed a Roadmaster battery disconnect on ours today, and it's a great way to do it. But as far as the 5 main minimum components, the first thing we'll have is the base plate, and that's going to attach to the frame of the vehicle and become the structural mounting point for all of our connections, but also allow us to be able to tow it down the road by attaching to our tow bar. And the tow bar is going to be the connection point between the base plate and the hitch on the RV. And just like towing a trailer, you have your safety cables that'll go onto the loops on the base plate, and that way in case of any disconnect, you're going to have those cables still holding on to the vehicle. We also have diode wiring, which is going to be cables that run to the taillight on the Encore, and that way when you're running your running lights, your turn signals, and brake lights, they're going to illuminate on the taillights of your towed vehicle, keeping you safe and legal. Many braking systems will also require tapping into diode wiring, so it's definitely worth picking up. Speaking of braking systems, we have a Blue Ox Patriot today, but all braking systems are going to have a breakaway cable. And this is in case of a catastrophic disconnect. This cable is going to pull and apply the brakes on the vehicle, bringing it to a stop so it's not rolling down the highway. Other than that, super easy. So follow along and I'll show you how to get it installed. The 12 volt outlet kit is a really easy installation, and this is something you'll want to add this on if you're doing a portable braking system, because they power up with 12 volt power with a cigarette style outlet like this. And a lot of times people think that you can use the one in the vehicle. It's not always the case, and especially on this vehicle where a battery disconnect is something that's necessary for it to be flat towed. So we want to make sure that we still have power for the braking system even when that battery is disconnected. And that's where this comes into play. Predominantly do see these just for portable braking systems, but you can really use it for a lot of different things. And as far as mounting it up, it's just this outlet and this bracket with 2 holes, and it comes with some self-tapping screws. That's going to allow you to mount that up wherever you want under the dash. A nice easy spot to be able to plug in your braking system. It does pop out of the bracket too, so if you have extra slack, that's kind of nice if you want to pull that around. A lot of times it seems like people just want to leave that permanently mounted, and you'll have plenty of slack from your portable braking system. Now it comes all pre-wired, and 9 times out of 10 we end up modifying that to make it a lot easier for the installation and just a little bit more robust. From the factory, they allow you to tap into fuses, but again, this is a battery disconnected vehicle, so we need to go directly to the battery for that 12 volt. So what I ended up doing was cutting off the fuse holder that's already in place, as well as the ring terminal, and that allows me to be able to pass my wires through the grommet a lot easier. Even though the fuse is small and the ring terminal is small, so is the grommet. And so to make it a little bit easier, I just cut those off and then I'll reattach them in the engine bay. But to get that wire passed through, there's a grommet that's located in the footwell with a small nipple. If you cut that off and take a large screwdriver or something to poke through that grommet, that's going to be the spot that you're going to run your wires through. And you're probably going to want a pull wire to be able to do that. You can use something as simple as a long zip tie to pass through that, tape it up, and then pull it from the other side. But it is hard to gain access to it from the engine bay. So just take your time, get a nice long pull wire, tape those wires up, and then pull it through. Try to do that at the same time as some of your other things. As far as our instance, we have our breakaway cable for for our braking system, and also the wires for our battery disconnect. I ran them all at the same time through the grommet and used a little bit of silicone spray to help pass those through. So focusing back on our 12-volt outlet kit, once I get this mounted up, we'll just have those wires pulled through the grommet, and then we'll connect it to the battery. Now, once the wires are passed through the grommet and through the firewall, you are going to want to attach this directly to the battery. And with this vehicle being a battery disconnect vehicle, make sure that your positive goes to the positive post, not the other side. And that way you're always getting the power even when the battery's disconnected. So since we did cut off those ends to get that passed through, pretty easy. The negative side will just get a ring terminal. I did have to source some larger ring terminals because of the studs on the battery being a little bit larger. So our negative, obviously, we go to the negative part of the battery. And if you're lost at which one was which because you cut it, the positive has a little bit of white writing on the wire. So just make sure that you're attaching the proper ones. And then this one, I have that same fuse that was in line. I put the ring terminal onto our positive post, and then when I attached it, I use a heat shrink butt connector. And these are also not included in the kit, but something worthwhile with any of your connections inside of the engine bay or ones that live outside of the vehicle, because once you heat that up, it's going to become a watertight seal and just prevent any water from breaking down those connections long term. So once you have that attached to your positive and negative, you can test the 12-volt system by plugging in really any 12-volt accessory, but if you have your braking system ready, you can plug that in. It should be powered up. So very simple. You're just really remotely creating an outlet, tying directly to your battery, so you always have that 12-volt. So as far as installation goes, super easy to do, and definitely something that you're going to want to do if you have that portable system. Now, when choosing different braking systems, many times people that flat tow quite often want a fixed system because it makes it super easy to just plug in and go. There's nothing to really set up or store, and it is a great option for those of you that are flat towing often, but the installation is a little bit trickier on those fixed braking systems. So if you're not super technical or savvy when it comes to mechanical things, the Blue Ox Patriot is not very difficult to get installed, and I think that's definitely the best part about it. So I'll show you how to get yours installed on your Buick. The first thing is going to be a breakaway switch. That's going to be standard with any braking system, and this is in case of a catastrophic disconnect. This cable, which will be attached to the hitch on the RV, is going to be, if everything was to fail as far as our safety cables and everything, our last line is this plunger being pulled, which will apply the brakes on the vehicle, bringing it to a stop. That way it's not rolling down the highway. And this system has a nice little plug that attaches to a harness that you'll run in for the breakaway switch. And then there's a 12-volt outlet that you're going to need to put in place for it to work. But other than that, that's really it. So let's start by tracing some of these wires, and I'll show you how to get it installed. First thing from our breakaway, I did mention there's a plug. I have it zip tied up behind our base plate that we have here. I just used some electrical tape to wrap that around the connection because it lives on the front of the vehicle, just to kind of prevent any moisture from building up in there. The rest of the cable, I just kind of routed along here, zip tying, you can see it here, and then made my way up towards the engine bay. Now, you probably noticed that the fascia is not on the vehicle. I will recommend trying to do this when you have your fascia off while you're putting your base plate on. It makes a lot of the routing a lot easier to do. It's still possible to do with the fascia on. It might just be a little bit tighter and trickier to do, but for our instance, we had it off already. Now, the cable, once I ran it up, I just found a path towards our grommet. And our grommet is much easier to gain access to from the inside. So what you'll do is there's a nipple on the grommet. You'll cut that off, poke a hole through it, and then feed either a zip tie or I use an airline tube, something to be a pull wire. So once you feed that up, you can take that plug in, tape it to it, and then pull it through the grommet. A little bit of silicone spray helps lubricate it to make it easier, but you'll need to get that passed through. And this braking system, specifically on this vehicle, you're going to want a 12-volt outlet kit. In most vehicles, you're going to want to pick that up as well. It's just a cigarette-style outlet that's going to give you 12-volt power to your braking system, regardless whether or not the battery's disconnected, which on this vehicle, we have our solenoid here to disconnect the battery. So with our 12-volt outlet kit, I just made sure that I have it directly to the battery post, so it always has the 12-volt power. So as you're running that breakaway switch through, you're going to definitely want to try to do that at the same time to run that 12-volt outlet kit through. It's just going to make it a lot easier. So once you get those passed in, it's really coming down to just plugging in the system and getting it set up. So I'll show you how to do that. We'll take our cigarette style plug from our braking system, plug it into our outlet, and I have the battery disconnected on our vehicle now, but you can see this lit up because we are directly tied into 12-volt power. So we have power there. That breakaway switch cable that we passed through, you're just going to plug that in on the center here. So if you have extra slack, it's not a bad thing. You may need to find a spot to tuck that, but it's going to allow you to plug this in without it being too tight. So just something to keep in mind, giving yourself a little bit of extra slack. And as far as the 12-volt outlet kit, you can have it kind of mounted wherever. There's a decent amount of slack from the braking system to where you should be able to plug that in pretty easily. So you'll grab the clip on the end of the cylinder, and that goes on your brake pedal. So just slide that over it, and you'll have the claws that kind of go around. And then once it's in place, there's this top tab. You'll just push that. That's going to drop down and then clamp around the pedal. If you ever need to release it, you can just simply pry that back up, pops off, and that's how you're going to set it up each time you need to flat toe. So we'll get ours clamped down. We have our breakaway plugged in and our 12-volt plugged in. So pretty easy here. We just need to get the seat dialed in to where it's going to actuate properly. So there's a few ways to do that. We have feet on the bottom that are adjustable. We have this backing plate that rests against the seat, and that's how the brakes are applied. This system's going to push that cylinder forward, but it needs something to back against, and that's where your seat is going to be that spot. So I raised this up to rest against, and then from here, we'll push power. It's going to kind of go through this sequence where it wants you to get it calibrated, so really easy. You just push the setup button. It's going to push that brake pedal, come back, and if everything's fine, it's going to become a solid green, and then you're ready to rock. It's all controlled via essentially telemetry and moving of G-force in the box. So as you apply the brakes, it'll apply accordingly, but you also have the monitor light, which is a really cool system that goes into the RV to where you can use it essentially like a brake controller. It's going to have a manual override, so if the towed vehicle is getting a little squirrely, you can pump those brakes, or you can have it just go along with that G-force of you stopping with your RV. Now, as far as getting it set up in your vehicle, you may want to play around with the heights. These are always kind of interesting for people that have never seen them because it's a little sloppy, and that's okay because the main thing is you want this to wedge against the seat to where it can push the pedal, and if this drags along or it's not exactly firm looking, it's not, you know, obviously straight up and down, that's okay. The main thing is it has a spot to push against to apply the pedal. Now, if you are setting this up and you get a red light, that's predominantly because you have pressure on that cylinder. So it wants it at a nice resting spot. So I'll show you real quick. Right now it's looking for me to obviously push that setup, but if I push this forward a little bit and put pressure on it, it'll tell you pretty quickly that solid red and solid blue, not good. So as I pull this back a little bit, we can get it back to that blinking green light. You may have to adjust the seat a little bit, and then it's going to go back to that. You can push the setup, and then it'll be ready to rock again. But other than that, that's going to do it for the installation of your Roadmaster 12-volt outlet kit on a 2025 Buick Encore GX.